Welcome to Bookmarks, where I share with you the bookmarks from the audiobooks I love. And today we're going to be talking about The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli. And did you know that gravity interacts with time? Oh, yes, they are strongly connected. And that means that objects fall because time is slower the closer you get to the center of gravity. What am I trying to say? Objects fall towards the center of the earth because time is slower there. Now, what does that mean for us? That means that technically our heads, which spend most of their time further away from the center of the earth, are younger than our feet. Isn't that a crazy thought? And it kind of explains why my feet hurt so much all the time. It's because they're old. Peace. Hey, welcome to Bookmarks. Today I'm going to be talking about The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli. So, we know that time speeds up and slows down depending on where you are located in the universe. So this may seem counterintuitive, but is it? So think about a river. Water flows more quickly in the middle than it does around the banks. Time's like that river. It does move at different rates depending on where you are. And just like the water in the river, it always moves in one direction. It might surprise you to find out that we understand this fundamental one directionality of time by understanding the directionality of temperature. To put it simply, just as time flows from past to future, heat flows from the hot to the cold. Put it another way, energy moves from being concentrated to being dispersed. This fundamental principle, first identified by French engineer Sadi Carnot, was later formalized by Rudolf Clausius and William Thomson, that's Lord Kelvin to you. It became the foundation of the second law of thermodynamics, which states that entropy, or disorder of an isolated system, always increases over time or remains constant in ideal cases. Now, just as a little side note, next time some based crypto bro tells you that order emerges from chaos, you can point out that actually it's the exact opposite. Chaos emerges from order if energy is not expended maintaining the order. It's called entropy, and it's one of the fundamental rules of the universe. All right? And yes, in a river, water flows more quickly in the middle than it does around the edges. But that's not the entire picture. The more closely you look, the more you realize there are little moments, little spots where the water flows backwards, tiny eddies and whirlpools, little loops of water. And here's a question I want to leave you with. And Carlo Rovelli, if he ever should watch this, I'd ask him as well. Do such loops exist in time? Peace. Welcome to Bookmarks. Today I'm going to be talking about The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli. Okay, imagine you have a ball in each hand. Could you drop those balls at the exact same time? It's pretty easy, right? Now, imagine somebody's holding a ball here on Earth, and another person is holding a ball on a spaceship orbiting Proxima Centauri. Could they drop the balls at the exact same time, like now? Well, no, they couldn't. And if that seems strange, that's because the universe is strange. But let me explain. I'll give you an analogy. Imagine there were two asteroids floating in space. Which one would be higher? That's a question that's impossible to answer because it's impossible to place them relative to anything else. I mean, are there other rocks that are higher? Compared to what? In the same way, if I were to ask you if an event happening here on Earth was happening at the same time as maybe an event on a distant star, you would have to say that question doesn't make sense. This is because the present is always being defined by the past and the future, all of which exist on a timeline that is unfurling at a different rate depending on your speed and location in the universe. That's general relativity. This means there's no single definitive moment that can be identified as a universal present. It's always in flux. No right here, right now, for everyone. So how does time work? Well, think about a family tree. Now imagine yourself existing between two cones. One cone is in the past. It represents your ancestors. One cone is in the future. And as it widens, it represents your descendants. And you're in the middle, bridging them. Now, could your cone overlap with somebody else's? Sure, but it doesn't have to. And that's how right now works in the universe. Just like with our human family, there's a relationship between the events in the universe that's partial, but not complete. Every event in the universe has a past and a future, but not every event in the universe is in every universe's events, past or future. Get it? Kind of? Well, if you kind of get it, that's good. Peace! Welcome to Bookmarks, talking about The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli. And let's talk about time zones. They're a relatively recent invention, and it's no coincidence that they came in with the invention of rail travel. The train and the telegraph brought in the need for coordinating clocks, and with that came the need for innovation. Albert Einstein started his career in the Swiss Patent Office, specifically looking at ways of coordinating clocks between train stations. No one can know for sure, but it's easy to imagine that Einstein's famous train thought experiment, which established the relativity of simultaneity, was inspired by meditating on just this problem. Just to explain the relativity of simultaneity, it was an idea that Einstein had that was very influential. It was an observation that simultaneity, or the idea that things happen at the exact same time, is not absolute. He puzzled this out by thinking about two people, one an observer on a railway platform, and the second a passenger on a train speeding through the station. The train is struck by two bolts of lightning at the exact same time. One hits the back of the train and the other hits the front. The observer on the platform observes the bolts of lightning hitting simultaneously. But for the passengers speeding through the station, for them, the light from the bolt at the front of the train comes first, and it takes a while after for the light from the back of the train to catch up. The bolts do not appear simultaneously for that person. Thus, the relativity of simultaneity. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's also a thing. An important thing that Einstein figured out by getting lost in thought. So don't be afraid of getting lost in thought. Maybe you're not lost. Maybe you're just going on a journey that no one's ever gone on before. Welcome to Bookmarks. I'm going to be talking about The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli. So let's take a moment to consider what the universe is like at its most fundamental level. Is it continuous or is it discrete? Is it going on forever or is it tiny little particles? Well, to paraphrase Carlo, the creator did not sketch the universe in fine lines, but rather she painted it with tiny dots, like the artist Seurat, or if you'd prefer, pixel art. And this means that ultimately, at the microscopic level, everything's made of particles. Light is made of photons, that's particles. Electricity, electrons, that's particles. There's quanta of energy Even space and time can be broken down into their fundamental units. So what are they? Well, the fundamental unit of time is known as Planck time. And no, that has nothing to do with how long you spend planking. It's how long it takes light to travel a distance known as the Planck distance, which is the shortest distance that can be measured. Since space and time are intertwined in a phenomenon known as space-time, well, it makes sense that they're also intertwined at their most granular level. And the next time somebody asks you for a moment and you're really not feeling it, say that you will give them 1 unit of Planck time. And that's only because it's impossible to give them any less. Peace. Have you ever heard of loop quantum gravity? And if you haven't, that's fair. That's more than fair. Loop quantum gravity, or loop theory, is the idea that space is not a continuous fabric, like the fabric of space-time you always hear about, but it's a discrete network of interconnected loops. Now, these loops, or spin networks, are the fundamental building blocks of reality. You might be tempted to call them time loops, but just to throw a curveball at you, in loop theory, time doesn't exist. Yeah, time's not required to understand the universe. How long ago was the Big Bang? Doesn't matter according to this theory. So what does matter? What matters is relationships, or more specifically, how these loops interact, how one interacts in relation to another. And you can use this the next time you're late for something. Don't blame the traffic or sleeping through your alarm. Just point out that, at the fundamental level, events do not and cannot ever be arranged in sequence. There's no before or after, so you can't be late. Let's see how that works out for you. Have you ever heard of loop quantum gravity? And if you haven't, that's fair. That's more than fair. Loop quantum gravity, or loop theory, is the idea that space is not a continuous fabric, like the fabric of space-time you always hear about, but it's a discrete network of interconnected loops. Now, these loops, or spin networks, are the fundamental building blocks of reality. You might be tempted to call them time loops, but just to throw a curveball at you, in loop theory, time doesn't exist. Yeah, time's not required to understand the universe. How long ago was the Big Bang? Doesn't matter according to this theory. So what does matter? What matters is relationships, or more specifically, how these loops interact, how one interacts in relation to another. And you can use this the next time you're late for something. Don't blame the traffic or sleeping through your alarm. Just point out that, at the fundamental level, events do not and cannot ever be arranged in sequence. There's no before or after, so you can't be late. Let's see how that works out for you. Okay, so the order of time establishes this pretty wacky idea that there is no such thing as time. Or to put it another way, time is not necessary to understand the universe, and it doesn't exist at its most fundamental, the atomic level. Yet somehow we experience time at the macroscopic level. So what is time? Well, according to the order of time, time is something we've already been talking about. Time is directly related to entropy. To quote the great William Butler Yeats from the poem The Second Coming, things fall apart. The center cannot hold. And not to belabor this point, but you might encounter thought leaders who tell you that order emerges from chaos. That's just not the nature of the universe. Entropy, or the tendency of things to fall apart, also known as the second law of thermodynamics, is a fundamental law of the universe, and it establishes what is known as the arrow of time. What's the arrow of time? It's how we perceive the sequences of events at a macroscopic level. So at the atomic level, things are happening. Entropy, energy transformations. And as energy transforms from one form to another, at the microscopic level, we experience entropy at the macroscopic, that's the multi-atomic level. Things fall apart. They don't fall together. And that is what gives rise to the arrow of time, time's direction. I'm going to leave you with a simple thought experiment to illustrate this. Now, imagine you see a glass smashed on the ground by the kitchen counter. It would be easy for you to reconstruct the story of how that glass got there. The glass falling, the glass shattering. You could picture the before, when the glass was on top of the counter. You can see the obvious after, with the glass shattered on the ground. Now, would you ever see a glass sitting on the kitchen counter and picture the opposite? Picture the glass shattered on the ground in a million little pieces. Then those million little pieces coming together, rising back up onto the counter and putting themselves back together. The broken glass, that's entropy, the order of time. Peace. Time emerges from the experience of being part of a system in which many, many atoms are interacting with each other in space. I know, sounds kind of weird, but that's what time is. This implies that in order to experience time, you need to experience the space in which that time is emerging. You can't experience it from the outside. It's kind of like time's a joke and you had to be there. Carlo Rovelli explains it like this. If you watch somebody shuffling a deck of cards and the cards became more disordered, that would make sense. If you saw that same video in reverse, it would be weird. That's our prejudice. Our brains naturally expect things to move from low entropy, order, to high entropy, disorder. That's how we separate the past from the future. Now, here's a paradox. Imagine two observers observing the same moment from two different perspectives. The first perspective is less ordered. The second is more ordered. The first observer will observe that moment as being in the past because it is more organized. But the second observer will observe that same moment as being in the future because it's less organized. How we experience time depends on our context. It's relative. So, keeping this in mind, the next time somebody says they haven't seen you in a long time, it's incumbent upon you to respond, well, that's just a matter of perspective. Peace. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about something that's a little bit counterintuitive. Heat loss and time are related. How? Well, the direction of heat loss, entropy, also represents the direction of time, the arrow of time. So think about it this way. Time isn't a thing in and of itself, but it's a phenomena that emerges as the universe falls apart and heat and energy are redistributed. So let's look at this really cool idea that Carlo introduces to us in chapter 11. Yeah, we're on a first name basis now. Now let's picture this ball. It's a nice bouncy ball. Okay, I want you to lift it high and drop it. What do you expect to happen? Well, of course, you would expect the ball to bounce back up. Would you expect it to bounce as high as where you dropped it from? No, you would imagine the ball bouncing up in smaller and smaller increments until it stopped bouncing altogether. That ball is a metaphor for the universe and entropy. Because you see, what happens is the ball loses heat every time it hits the ground. And with that energy loss, it doesn't retain the energy to bounce back up to its original height. So you can see this is an exercise in entropy. It's losing its energy. Okay? Think of that ball lifted all high. It's ready to be dropped. That represents the potential energy contained within the Big Bang. The Big Bang being the moment at the beginning of the universe, that singular moment when all matter in the universe was just like packed into one little hot mess. Okay, one little spot. That is the universe's moment of lowest entropy. Its moment of highest organization. And it's been falling apart ever since. Think of the Big Bang as dropping the ball. And the universe has been bouncing with less and less energy each time. Eventually, it's going to stop bouncing altogether. Okay? That energy transfer is going to stop altogether, and that's what we call the heat death of the universe. This is the way the universe ends. Not with a bang, but with maximum energy dispersion, maximum entropy. Energy is no longer available to be exchanged, and life, as we know it, ceases to be a possibility. I think that's a nice thought to end on. Peace! I'm asking you to imagine time not as a thing that exists in and of itself, but rather as a property that emerges as a result of the universe falling apart. This means that time is a thing to be experienced. And how do we experience time? We experience it with our brains. Carlo Rovelli puts it this way. The brain doesn't just exist in the present moment. It weaves together memories of the past and anticipations of the future to create our experience of time. And that's a subjective experience. So entropy occurs and the universe collapses. This unleashes an exchange of energy. It starts the clock, so to speak, and we experience that resulting time, and we put it together into an order of a past that informs our present and allows us to anticipate a future. All of these exist in our brain, which is the machine that captures time. But it's more than that. Our brains don't just capture time. They capture the experience that is encapsulated within that time. They capture the ideas of that time. And they even allow them to be shared into other times. In this way, our brain truly does become a time machine. So here's a proposal I have for you. And I'm actually trying to do it right now myself. Reach into the vast world of thought that already exists. Read, learn, think, find ideas that excite you and put them into your brain. Process them. Think about them even more. Then, whatever you've come up with, share those ideas, put them back out into the world. And in hopefully so doing, you become a small link in the chain that is our shared human consciousness. You make your mark on history. You take your place in time. Peace. Okay, so I've been pecking around this idea that time is an emergent property that depends on your relative speed. Or, to put it another way, the faster you move, the slower time moves for you relative to someone who's just sitting there. Now, this gives rise to the famous twin paradox. One astronaut twin stays stationary on Earth, and the other one jets away from Earth at close to the speed of light, only to come back 5 minutes later and discover that their twin is now many, many years older than him. This experience is known as time dilation, and it's happening all the time. The thing is, we don't notice it because we're never moving fast enough to notice it. We're also not big enough to notice it. If we were able to observe clocks on distant stars, and those clocks on the distant stars didn't melt, we would observe that they move at different speeds. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. Imagine a sentient beam of light. How would it experience time? It wouldn't. The equations of time dilation break down at the speed of light. Time doesn't exist in the universe when you're traveling at the speed of light. Now, imagine that the entire universe itself were a sentient being. This sentient universe would not experience time. It's not moving relative to anything else, as it is the only thing. The clock would never get started. So how old is the universe? Well, if you asked the universe, it might say it doesn't understand the question. Peace.